Welcome to the Impact Driven Leader Podcast, Monday Newswire edition with me, your host, Tyler Dickerhoff. Today also, as well, like every Monday, today's Tuesday.
Today's Tuesday.
I digress. It is what it is. Man, producer Alex, here with us, live and in the flesh.
Do it.
Sporting his DJ Bad Ash.
Got the hat, got the new look.
Are you clean?
Yeah.
You are good to go. Today, we're going to cover, I would say, controversial. Man, there's a lot to this. I'm looking forward to the Netflix documentary, the Netflix show, because it's gonna be deep. Yeah, somebody's already producing it. The murder of UnitedHealth CEO Brian Thompson, which is a tragedy. A father, a husband, a leader, and the apprehension just yesterday. If we were live yesterday, we would have not had that news. Luigi Mangione. Here's the initial take on it: is murder is never the solution, never. But also a lot of the commentary, a lot of the things that we've seen is just a major indictment to the entire health insurance industry of an individual who's documented pain, documented back pain injury, who, you know, in some of the stuff I read this morning, actually retracted from the bright, exciting individual he was, engaging with his friends. And seemingly, as my impression, was in so much pain and anguish that it led him to carry out this egregious act, horrific act of murdering a man. But as much as that's the story, I want to go into the other piece of the story, is just understanding the feedback from so many of how we got here.
Yeah. I mean, let's start with this. Let me give you the timeline for those that don't know maybe the story. They may have heard about it and what's going on.
If they don't know where they've been, but maybe they haven't studied as much as you have in preparation for today.
Yeah,
call it that.
Yeah, and so quick timeline for our listeners. November, so Mangione arrives in New York City about 10 days before the assassination. And he's staying at what do they call those?
A hostel.
A hostel.
Have you ever stayed in a hostel?
I have not, actually.
When I was in New Zealand, I stayed in several hostels. It was just normal. And I thought that was interesting. One of the stories from the interviews at this New York hostel is there's a lot of Kiwis, New Zealanders at the hostel. All right. I digress. Go ahead.
So he's staying at the hostel. He's casing the Midtown Hilton Hotel throughout this time. Probably looking for exits where this gentleman's going to be to do what he does, on December the 4th, which is take the life of the CEO of UnitedHealth. And so he arrives there. It's early morning. And there's how they know all this information. So the surveillance in New York City is next level. I mean, they have video cameras everywhere throughout that city. So they've identified the suspect. They can see that he arrived in New York City from a Greyhound bus from Atlanta, Georgia, 10 days earlier. He went to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, surveillanced the Midtown Hotel, checks into the hostel. Like they can see all this, right? And his actions and what he did pretty quickly, which is impressive. And then he goes and takes the train to 57, goes and gets a coffee, a water, a granola bar. Crazy. They have all these details at a Starbucks in Midtown. The surveillance video captures him talking on the phone to someone. He arrives this is early in the morning, before 7 a.m., arrives at the New York Hilton and waits several minutes as Brian Thompson leaves the hotel very early in the morning, headed for the Hilton. And that's when Thompson shoots him, 6:44 a.m. It says the weapon appears to malfunction, requiring manual cycling after each shot, and he shoots him dead, pretty quickly. Police respond to the spot, and this is all happening in minutes. They have all this down. And he gets on a bicycle and on an e-bike, and heads to the west side on 85th Street, and he's riding uptown before he gets to the GWB, the George Washington Bus Station. And then, I think that he dies on site, I believe, the UnitedHealth CEO, Brian Thompson.
I saw this morning they declared him, so the shooting was at 6:44, emergency personnel 6:48, transferred him to Mount Sinai at 7:12. He was pronounced.
Yeah. And then time passes. So 5 days later, December 9th, just yesterday, on Monday, they find Luigi Mangione in Altoona, Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
At a McDonald's. A worker, sees someone that looks like the suspect, They call him in. Police come. He has a fake ID, I believe a silencer. They take him into custody, which kind of leads us in today of, he's in New York City. He has been charged. The mugshots are out for murder. He has been charged for murder. And kind of that's like the timeline events. It happens. All this is happening within, the last 4 or 5 days, the shooting, the escape, and now him in jail and being prosecuted for the murder. And so now we go into, what happens now? What's in the manifesto? There's like two sides, right, Tyler?
So while part of that information is that he had a manifesto, 262 words, as I read this morning, on him, in that he kind of just really pointed fingers at the parasitic industry of healthcare insurance. And as you read more, a lot of the combing of his social media is that he had a back injury, had surgery maybe earlier this year. You start to wonder if it wasn't successful, whatever it may be. A lot of his friends commenting that he just kind of fell off the face of the earth, which was not like him. Some of them knew about this back injury. That's where they spoke of it, which was pretty substantial, but yet there's no indication of where it came from. He was a high school athlete. He seemed to live an active life, and don't know if there was an accident, something happened that he injured his back. But here's the couple questions that I have as you're going through that timeline. And starting from the beginning, there's this question of how did Mangione know Thompson's movements? It's one thing to know that UnitedHealth has a shareholder meeting at a certain location, but how did he know where he was staying? How did he know what time of the morning that he was going to be leaving? Because seemingly there was you can think, all right, I'm going to wait out there. The meeting starts at 8. I'm going to get there early enough. But there almost seems like there was, I don't want to call to this being the case, but there was some type of interaction that he would know well enough the timing to carry out this act.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back a little further, this Mangione, 26 years old, young guy, comes from a good family, like no past history with violence or anything.
I mean, his cousin is a representative, a statesman in Maryland.
Yeah, well, it comes from a wealthy family. Went to all these big UPenn private high school,
Ivy
laude,
League.
electrical engineer.
We got to watch out for Ivy League people.
Yeah, you're one of them, I think.
Yeah.
And true. So, you think he's on this path and there's no signs of like mental health. Then you mentioned this injury, which seems to be a pretty severe back injury. And then you go, okay, like how does one go from, and a lot of people get injured and suffer, but they don't go all the way to this length. So, and then in my mind, it's like, well, who's infiltrating this young man's mind to kind of do a 180 and go, you need to go after this guy because, okay, the health insurance.
Well, I mean, but here's where I layer in. One of the things been documented is that he did an analysis of the Unabomber's writings.
Yeah.
Unabomber, Ivy League educated as well. Just note there. And the other point of that is, I think if you understand from the combing of the social media timeline, sometime earlier in the year, March, April, there was some type of procedure. And this is the thing that I wonder is the recovery. Let's think about it. And part of what was written on the shell casings was deny, delay, depose, which was a reference to a book of a little bit different title. It was deny, delay, defend in a, kind of healthcare denial. Right. And so you speculate, this is 100% speculation. Was there a complication where insurance wouldn't cover? And there seemingly is kind of like coming from a family that supposedly had the monetary funds to be able to possibly cover this and not be under strain, understand some of the strain. And was there a Robin Hood of essence? Like, yes, I have means, but yet if you're going to do this to me, you're doing it to others. Again, all speculation, just trying to understand this, but as well knowing the atrocity that is our healthcare system, both from my own personal experience, knowing healthcare providers that just, it is so difficult to get funded, to get paid. You and I were just talking about this the other day and getting ready, preparing for this, and it's open enrollment season. So I'm getting all of these text message, email pitches to switch my insurance. And I recently, a year ago, we got rid of our health insurance and moved to a cooperative pay solution because we continually would go to our healthcare providers for seemingly benign things and would be denied. We don't take your insurance. Your insurance is no longer applicable here. And so we would end up paying this, high copay, this high cash amount. We're like, why do we even have this insurance that we're paying, as a family of $5, $1,600, $1,700 a month for, and high deductible because we don't have anything and not getting anything. So that's my own experience, that you start to paint and I think so many social media commentaries, like, I understand why the guy did it. And you're like, I don't think it's the way to go about taking the life of someone, much less CEO. But then you come back, and when so many people, like, dude, I can understand the level of angst and frustration that gets someone to that point.
I mean, we saw it, when President Trump was nearly assassinated, right?
Totally.
From that degree, right? I think and another young man, trying to eliminate who they think is the opposition and angry at a particular individual or side. And to do these things is horrible. I mean, we should not be doing anything like that. I think there's better ways of handling it. Obviously, you can vote for a president, so that helps. So you can't vote in and change the CEO or the administration in healthcare.
Yeah, but let's take a moment there. One of the things that I think has been cumbersome, and I was thinking about this, we live in a capitalistic society, and part of a capitalistic society is consumers have choice. Consumers have choice to say, for example, I don't like, we work together as a partnership. You provide a service to me. If all of a sudden one day I was like, Alex, we're done, right? And I, eliminate our relationship, conclude our relationship, and I go a different way, that's my prerogative, and vice versa. You could fire me one day, right? Okay, great. Understandable. I look then at the healthcare and I think about that. No, they don't make it like that at all. We have a government mandate that is kind of retired, but it's still there, where you have to have some type of insurance. Number two is there's really a limited time of year, unless you're an employer situation, even an employer situation, a limited time of year. Like, you're your own business owner, I'm my own business owner, I have to procure my own insurance. Well, there's a fine window, I think it's a 45-day window, November 15th to January 1st, open enrollment, that you can change your insurance. All right, so they limit the ability of a consumer to be a consumer. Number three thing, so often in so many cases, you see payment or healthcare denied because it was pre-existing.
Well,
and I think these layers make that industry so set up for, you're not there for the consumer, and there's so many layers you're not there for the consumer, and the whole directive, as they're trying to earn more and more and more money for their shareholders, and you watch the profits of insurance companies skyrocket, and you talk to medical professionals that are like, we keep getting denied. You go to any medical professional, from a chiropractor to dental to surgery center, and they will tell you the worst part of all medical care is dealing with insurance company.
There's so many. This is from the Commonwealth Fund. I mean, we spend the most amount of money on healthcare, but seem to have worsening outcomes. This is just crazy. U.S. has the highest infant mortality death rate in the world. How the hell?
So the question is, does that include like places like the Sudan, or I don't know, is that in like developed countries? Because I can see that.
It has New Zealand, Japan, UK. I mean, these are like pretty developed.
I would say developed countries. So first world countries.
Yeah, but
okay.
For the amount of money we spend on average 3 times more or 4 times more on healthcare than, for example, South Korea, New Zealand, Japan, who are way lower. I mean, this is part of the frustration. How do we have this type of outcome when we're spending so much on healthcare, but the results don't seem to say, oh, you know what? You spend more because you're getting more. You're getting more care. You're living longer. It's the opposite. It's you spend more, but You're not getting
Okay.
anything.
So we started with the conversation about the murder of CEO Brian Thompson, the apprehension of Mr. Mangione. There's a transitionary point as we're discussing here. And I think the real thing that I believe this identifies is not the choice of an individual to take out their frustrations. I'll just describe it as that. But what's the real story is what led to that. And that's what we're touching on now and here in describing that we have an industry that's primarily unchecked. I would say there's not a lot of checks and balances because of the three things I listed earlier. Here's something that's recent. Now, I just picked this up. It wasn't, if I had the reference, I would gladly reference it, but it talked about how medical profession is usually a family honored. You get into medical because your family's been in medical, and it's this desire to kind of continue the family legacy or the opportunity. And the reduction, this happened pre-COVID. COVID has driven it where we have less and less and less and less people that want to get into the medical field. And you have less people that want to get into traditional medical fields, working in the hospital, having a clinic. And when you survey them and talk to them, when you talk to retiring doctors, they're like, this is not what I started into. And the insurance industry has ruined the medical profession. Those are the words they say. And you have so much conglomeration where these large medical institutions like UnitedHealth not only has a CEO, but also a provider, side of it. And I have friends that, are surgeons, and they recently got taken over by they were a private little group. They got taken over by one of these large conglomerates. One of the big reasons why is they didn't have the infrastructure or the margin to continue to deal with and go up against the mounting insurance pressure. Not only their own malpractice, those type of insurance, things, but dealing with the delay of payment. It's funny, we, like I said, mentioned that we changed to a cooperative pay a year ago. It's been great. It's been fine. Just by doing that, when you walk into a medical provider and you say you're going to do cash pay, that's what it turns out to be, automatically off the top, 60% lower price.
Well, Tyler,
and so, going back to a lot of these positions, it's like, all right, to take out your frustrations on a man, that's not the way. But here's the other part. Who are our leaders that are standing up and saying, man, we're screwing over our customers? Our customer is not the shareholder. Our customers who our business is providing service to, and we're continuing, in this case, taking money from them at a higher clip, paying less to the providers in order to give greater profits to our shareholders. And you're like, this is not the way it should be.
There's a gentleman, his name's Gary Brecka, and he said this publicly. Yeah. You've heard of him.
Yeah.
He's a health professional, worked in the health insurance business for a long time. And he's said this publicly. You can go YouTube, Gary Brecka, health insurance story. He worked for these companies. They have the data and the information on all of us.
Yeah.
Our medical problems, our issues. Yeah. And he was the one that could see all this information and go, this person needs help. They need this service to get healthy. And they would deny them.
Yes.
The insurance companies would deny them because they said it was, and he left, right?
He's doing his own thing now.
He's doing his own thing now because he couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't unsee what he had saw and say, I need to continue this. And that was a decision he had made. If that's the truth, which I assume all of that is by his stories and the information he had, then what is the leadership saying and doing within these health insurance businesses, knowing that they have this information and basically putting profits before people? And I think any leader needs to take a look at that, because it leads to these kinds of outcomes, which is atrocious.
I'm going to reference a book that, excuse me, I'm still trying to get over this thing you gave to me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, dude. It came through screen. Malcolm Gladwell, his book, Revenge of the Tipping Point. And he leads the start of the book, finishes the end of the book. And he really kind of says, why did Purdue Pharma and OxyContin get how it was. And he started, and one of the things is the family was like, well, we didn't think it would cause problems. Like there was no indication this would ever be an issue. And Malcolm kind of alludes to this. Are you absolutely kidding me? You created something that was so addictive, and you knew it was addictive, and you knew the form in which was going to cause for greater addiction. And that was one of the drivers and how your business promoted the sales of the product, that you would have people that relied on it, and the misuse of it was actually going to be more rampant because you made it so, almost too good. And it kind of comes around and like, yeah, now that entire company in an industry of pain clinics is just under massive upheaval. But if you look at what we're talking about, the comment that you just made, and you look at these leaders and you're saying, you didn't know. You didn't know by implementing AI to analyze and say, I'm going to deny coverage, as some of them has done, which was a recent revelation, or the fact that you knew that you were going to be under a DOJ investigation and you started dumping stock to the tune of 15 to 18 to 20 million. You didn't know. And I'm going to play dumb and say, okay, fine. Maybe they didn't. And that was just normal course of, you hit a certain price, we'll dump out, we will move assets just to get, all right, that's a very understandable trading philosophy. But on the background of that in our society, which RFK has spoken against and say, this is broken and it's got to be fixed.
Because for so long they've gotten away with it. And I think this is where, there needs to be a titanic shift in leadership across all major, all major industries, from pharmaceutical to insurance to media. It really starts with the leadership, because for too long, greed and not being of service to people has been really for profit has been the motto for so long. And I think
it's been defended.
And this, you can be a good, successful leader who is of service to people and still make a ton of money. Why, Tyler, why for so long, though, that these major conglomerates said, no, let's not be of service to people and do the right thing, make a shit ton of money, and we'll put that first. But you see that people can put people first, still make a ton of money, and still make a positive impact on people's lives. Like, why do we, it's been done. Like, what is that, like a human nature problem? Is that how for thousands?
Well, I would just say it. Evil and greed are alive in this world. I had a friend share this with me is, I'm a person of faith, and there's other people of faith that I know, and they're like, how can God create such atrocities? And one of the things that I've come to learn and know and grow is, without the darkness, a light doesn't shine. And I think that's an example of, here's where we're seeing a shift in a trend to say, no, we need to do better, and let me show you how to do better. And, again, as a person of faith, there's a story in the Bible of a man named Saul. And Saul was a modern day Al-Qaeda that was killing every Christian he could find. That's what he was. And on a walk through, on a journey to a city, he ended up going blind and having a coming to faith. And Jesus said, hey, don't kill my people. And he went on to become one of the greatest evangelists for Christian faith. Just an example. And I see that going on, that without that darkness, you can't have light. And I think the ability to say, hey, is this a turning point? We can do better, and we need to do better with people, points them to something much bigger in life. In your example, right, you can do good work and still make money and take care of people. And eventually what happens, if you put the money, the fame, the status in front of caring for people, then eventually it's going to come against you. And if you put, I'm going to care about people, I'm going to serve people, eventually you will have that, and you get to look around and say, hey, my conscience is clear. And if someone takes my life, okay, then I'm standing up for light instead of surrounding myself in darkness. And so I see this evolution in others. I see this evolution happening in people in our society that have chased the money. Deion Sanders talks about it. You and I sat there and he talked about it. His life, I chased the money and I was so hurt and so broken and so lost and so like, no, there's got to be a better way. Is he perfect? No, none of us are. None of us are. And yet I think that's where there's, again, a bigger piece of this story. And I wonder, going back to Malcolm Gladwell, could this murder? This is not to justify by any means. But one of the things that happens is, there wasn't a mandate that you had fences around a pool to keep young kids from drowning until there were some kids that drowned. Just what it was. And does this make everyone wake up and say, whoa, if someone was that frustrated with the system that they would carry out the murder of an executive and think that was going to change things, what are we missing? I think back to podcast guest Dean Stott, just released a couple weeks ago, private security. And Dean shared that, he works with a lot of, the Brian Thompson types, these CEOs, the family office, these type of things. And, one of the things he talked about is like, hey, I'm not there to run security systems for them. My job is to teach them. And one of the things that I take away from Dean and I think about now, I'm going to guess his clients, when he talks to them, he often says, are you doing things that people want to come and shoot you over? Just stop and think about that. I'm not putting words in Dean's mouth, but sitting down for an hour or so with Dean and knowing the heart, a guy who could have charged whatever he want, but to escort 18 people out of Libya for the Canadian government, he charged them $7,000 because that's all it cost. I have to think a person like that is saying, hey, let's make sure your P's and Q's are in line and that, you're doing the right things in business. Now, do I know his clientele? No, absolutely not. Not at all. It's all speculation. But I stop and think about some of those cases where, all right, we're in the world we are now. And if you're constantly looking over your shoulder, there's probably a reason why. I'm not saying Brian did, but I also know there's documented he was receiving threats.
Yeah, he was. And it kind of reaches the boiling point, right? And that is when the tea kettle, starts ringing and starts whistling, it leads to a tragic event like this. And I think it's gone to that point. And I'm curious to how other CEOs and executives in the health industry are going to respond.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. You're the CEO of one of the large other companies. We'll say Anthem, Blue Shield, Blue Cross, whatever. Are you going into your executive meetings and saying, hey, all of our heads are on the chopping block, proverbially, right? Are we making this situation worse, or maybe we need to realign our practices?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, right? Is it we need protection for ourselves? You see what happened? Or is it, hey, we need to change things up here?
What are we doing?
Yeah, like what exactly? And that's where, and I don't know, but that's kind of what you talk about a lot is, are they going to look at themselves in the mirror and how are they going to respond to what just occurred here? And yeah, this young man is going to, he's going to be charged for murder and he's probably going to go away forever or I don't know exactly what the rules
depending on the state of New York. I don't know.
Yeah, the state and that's going to be the outcome and deservingly so. You can't take the life of another. But clearly, I mean, you see on social media and from personal experiences, from friends, from family, that there is a major issue with healthcare and health and insurance within this country. And everything just seems to be getting more and more expensive. We're not getting healthier, right? We're not having the best health overall, longevity in the world because we're paying more. It seems to be quite the opposite. And so everyone's aware of that.
I mean, here's what's interesting. And just as a last snapshot to that, I calculated out our insurance cost, just our insurance. I'm talking about home, vehicle, health, $3,000 a month. And that's not having like premium. That's bronze level. That's just covering our bases. That's nothing. And I stopped and thought about that. I was talking to a friend about that a couple of days ago, and I was like, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Yeah. And here's the other piece of that. It's a lot of money when you feel like, man, I keep getting nickel and dimed when it comes to, that includes our house, that includes, vehicles, that's all of it. That would be health insurance. And it's just like, man, it's a strain. And knowing that the number one increase in cost in 2024 was vehicle insurance.
Yeah, insurance.
And when you stop and look at, again, the overlay of this action, again, not condoned, egregious. Man, are we taking a deep look to say, how did we get here? I have friends that work in the insurance industry. And, I look to them and say, hey, it's an industry that we have to subscribe to. It's our society today. And I look at them, they're not the ones making decisions. Do we deny people or not? That's not them. And yet I look at it to say, man, how are they getting pinched in this? If you're an open enrollment, person, you're working right now, you're trying to sell healthcare to the person that's been paying attention that maybe has had, how do you go and sell your product to people? It's got to be difficult in today's world.
Yeah. It's a big question. It's a much deeper, we'll get in we'll go into the deep state. Government.
We haven't even gone into conspiracy theories yet.
Conspiracy theories, and
you listed a whole lot of them here. And I think some of them have been proven wrong, but the big one is the fact of, this is to me, the big question here. Who do insurance companies really serve? Do they serve the medical provider? Do they serve the patient? Or do they serve their shareholder? And this is what I know. You can't have more than one master.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough.
So as we put a bow on this one, more will come out about this. More, we will see more over time. Again, it's a tragedy. I feel for the Thompson family. I feel for his kids. I feel for all of those things. There is no justification in the murder of someone. I absolutely feel for it, but it is entirely an overlay of a much bigger story. And again, I feel for the family, and it's painful and atrocious. As we wrap up, Alex, any final thoughts on your end?
No, I just always appreciate these conversations where we can just talk about, big, I would say, issues, underlying issues that are happening in this country. And, that we can discuss this in an open format and agree sometimes, we agree a lot on a lot of things. Some things we don't, but just being able to have this forum to talk about what's going on, what's happening, and hopefully educate people on kind of your perspective and views on these things through a leadership perspective and lens.
Great. As we wrap, thanks everyone for watching, whether you're on LinkedIn Live or you're watching the recap here on YouTube. Thanks for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that way you're notified for each video, new content that we add twice a week. As well, the bell, so that way when we share any shorts, you can see and get notified for that. One last thing is there's multiple different ways to be involved in the impact-driven leader community. My signature community, which is the roundtable, we get started here in February. You can go to impactdrivenleader.com to find more information about that. Apply for it. As well, the Impact Summit, May 7th and 8th in Spokane, Washington. You're invited. I would love to have you there. Go to impactdrivenleadersummit.com. Again, impactdrivenleadersummit.com to buy your tickets to be there in person. Because one of the trends in 2025 that I know is going to play out is in person is important. And I'd love to see you there in person. Thanks for being here. Till next time, choose to lead with impact.